Okay everyone, welcome back to the second video. In this video we're going to pose this character and continue further detailing. We're going to make the roughen for the base, maybe make his sword and get his cape in place. And just to show you a refresher, here's the concept that we're going to try to match. And I'm going to provide this concept in a link in the description if you'd like to download that, or if you'd like to sketch your own, even better. So, okay. We're going to alt left click on the body because this is the thing that we're actually going to remesh. Look at this, look at that tush, nice little angle on that tush. Let's smooth that out a little first. I'm getting sidetracked here. Give him a little bit of an arch in his back, and then his legs are still a little bit stubby, so I'm going to make those a little bit longer. A little bit longer, yeah, nice and athletic. Okay. Okay, enough of getting sidetracked. So what I like to do is work in kind of a non-destructive workflow. So I want to retain this mesh just in case I need it for backup in the Dynamesh phase. But we're going to actually Z-remesh this into a clean topology so we can easily pose this character using transpose master. I just find that a lower poly count is just easier to pose overall. And right now we have all these polygons, okay? So what I'm going to do is come over here to, in my geometry drop down to my subtool palette, I'm going to hit Z remesh, but I'm going to change this to 2 instead of 5, and then just hit Z remesh. Make sure your symmetry is on, by the way. Make sure that dot is over there. And we're going to do that. And cool. And I love Z remesh. It's come a long ways over the years. This is pretty awesome already. So we're going to stay with this. And then the way you use transpose master, and what that is a way to easily pose your character with like a temporary rig. Like, is it a temporary skeleton in a sense, or you do so that you can get him posed to the way you want it, but it's also going to combine it all into one subtool, and I'll show you how that works. So make sure that all of your subtools are visible, at least the ones that you want to pose. So I turned off my Dynamesh. It probably isn't necessary to have that as a backup, so I'm going to delete this. Just hit OK. And we want everything except for that top sphere visible. And if I come over to Z plugin and go to transpose master and click on this one button over here, you'll notice that all of my subtools were combined into one subtool. But rest assured, our other subtool is still alive and well over here. We've just now switched to this one for the purposes of transpose so that we can get this dynamic pose that we have. And what I like to do is I like to pose the body first, the torso area first. It just makes more sense to me. So by doing that, what I can do is you first have to draw out your masks, okay? So I'll turn Shift F off so we're not seeing the polyframe. I'm going to make sure my mask pen is my control tool. And then I'm going to just select like just that much of the body. And in order to blur your mask, you can control left click on the geo and it will blur your mask, or you can come over to masking and just do blur mask. You can do other things too, grow, shrink, dilute, all these cool things. But for now I just want to blur that. And in order to pose the characters, I want them to lean forward like in this dynamic pose. Go over here to rotate, and I'm going to unlock my pivot and move it over to where I want the body to pivot from, and I'm going to relock and then drag that circle like so. Okay. And then from there we can see, oh, okay, I want his head to be looking up more. So I'm going to come over here and holding control, I'm going to switch over to my mask lasso. Holding control, mask lasso, and then if I click and left click and drag, control left click and drag, I've now drawn a mask there, and so I'm going to blur that mask. I'm going to invert my selection by control left clicking and repose my pivot, and then relock it, and then make his head look up a little bit more. Okay, so now we're getting kind of this interesting pose going, and we have to spread the legs apart so that they're in a more of a dynamic kind of athletic pose. And I'm going to control left click to clear my mask. I'm going to grab just this one leg for now using the lasso tool, blur my mask, control left click and blur, invert my mask by control clicking. And one fun thing too is you can still use the older transform gizmo. If you click that button, it just gives you these 3 dots right here. Well, there's lots of dots, but these 3 orange dots. And if you click and drag on your mesh, you're basically drawing out the joints in your leg. Just remember that when you draw out from the front, you're going to have to move over to the back or to the side in profile and move that pivot to where it needs to be. So if you're clicking on this outer circle, you're good to go to move your joints wherever in the center, this center one. And now if I want to rotate this leg forward, whoops, I'm on move. So make sure that we're on rotate. And then we're going to rotate that leg forward because I think that leg was going forward. Yep. Cool. So we're going to rotate it, and I'm going to move it by selecting the inner circle of this middle one. And then obviously there's always going to be some cleanup in the joint area. I find this part kind of satisfying. A lot of artists find this like really tedious and just terrible to do, but I think it's so cool that you can pose a character without having to go through the whole rigging process. And it's kind of like the ZBrush's best kept secret too, because a lot of people don't realize that you can fully pose characters in dynamic poses without having to go through rigging. So I'm just doing the same thing with this leg now. I've drawn out my masked area. I'm moving my joints to where they need to be. And then while rotate is activated, I'm clicking the inner circle right there and moving that leg back. And then sometimes you have to remove your joints and you snap them back into into place. It's handsy, it's kind of ugly, but it's still just super cool that we can do this without bugging those pesky riggers. Just kidding, I've always loved riggers. Riggers are my favorite. All right, cool. So how we looking? Getting there. We're getting closer. He needs to be probably leaning forward way more. His head probably should be a little bit bigger. And I'm just using the snake hook brush to kind of push it that extra little bit. Still, his legs and his joints are probably a little too skinny. So I'm going to inflate these out. Okay, so one thing you've noticed too is if I hit X and turn on symmetry, our symmetry is off now because we've posed our character. The reason I had you Z-remesh this character with symmetry on is because this topology, this edge flow, is perfectly symmetrical on the body. And so that way, if I come over here to transform and I say use posable symmetry, it will now, actually, you know what, it doesn't work because this isn't clean. So I was hoping to get that to work properly, but we're going to have to just work around it. So for this purposes, our symmetrical modeling is not going to hold up. So it's no good. But if I were to have just done that with just the body, then it would have worked fine. I'm going to mask this again and then repose it with the transform tool because it needs to be kind of rotated outward. And as you smooth, things just tend to shrink. So I find myself, you just kind of normal, like shrink it and then go back to the inflate brush and kind of inflate things back out a little bit. Give it the mass that it needs. Okay, let's see what that's looking like. And his head needs to be kind of turned and tilted to look more at camera. So I'm going to mask his head completely and come over here, left click and drag, or left click, control left click to invert that, and then I'm going to drag my joints out over the neck, and then I'm going to rotate his head so he's looking more like at camera. Okay, nice. And then the last things we need to pose are his arms. His arms are pretty, they're spread out like an eagle, like he's in he's in that pose, like he wants to murder something. So we're gonna just rotate those out. Moving the pivot. I like how they're kind of pointed back though, that's kind of cool. So snake hook brush. And again, make sure that your Sculptris Pro is not on for the transpose portion of this, because that will break it when you send it back into your other subtools. It's going to blow your mind. So one way to drag, so one of the purposes of having clean topology, I should have explained this much earlier, is if you have clean topology, you kind of drag out your weights more easily by control and left clicking along the topology. You can see how it follows that arm better. If I were to try to do that in its Dynamesh state, it does work, but it's a little bit trickier. So for me, that's why I get like a lower topology that's a clean topology into Transpose Master, because it's so much more convenient, so much easier to drag those weights out. So okay, I'm rotating the arm up, and this is going to be a sword arm. Yeah. Okay, and then Control Shift left click, make sure everything's still there. It's good. So we might want to rotate all of our character, switching back to the original transpose tool, or the new transpose tool. I call it the new one, but it's been there for years now. Just rotating him down just a little, and then legs coming up, body's getting a little bit more curved and dynamic looking, and this neck just isn't, it's kind of weird looking. I'm gonna make that smaller and just less intrusive. There we go. All right. So now you're thinking, okay, we've got this character posed, but I want him back in my subtool, in my original subtools. So what you do from here is you come over here to, and this is assuming that you haven't done any retopologizing or any dynameshing, right? So if you have done that, this is going to break. But if you have maintained the topology as it is and you've just posed it around, it'll work fine. So come back to Z plugin and go over to T-pose sub T, and then it's going to slap everything back into your subtools. You're going to retain all of your structure, your naming, but everything's going to be posed. So just keep in mind too that we actually maintained our transpose. Because we have a clean topology, now even though the legs are split apart and the arms are doing different things, we can still sculpt symmetrically on the body. Not that I know that, I don't know if we're going to need to as much, because the body doesn't have just a ton of detail. And I kind of have to determine what that detail is going to look like later on, because our concept is pretty rough. And that's something that you constantly have to do as a 3D artist. Like I found that over the years that I used to kind of go back to the concept artist and say, hey, can you flesh this out a little bit more? Or can you give me a T-pose of this or whatever? And I feel like it gets you more ahead as an artist, as a ZBrush artist, if you can kind of flesh through these ideas on the 3D side, even though it can in the long run be a little bit more expensive. Sometimes it's good to be able to have that ability to be like, okay, to translate things into 3D. It's harder than it looks, for sure. But this guy's looking pretty cool. So, all right, I'm going to save this character. And let's add a base real quickly, so he's not just standing on nothing. So I'm going to come over to append and do a, let's do a cylinder. So this I'm going to rename to base _ geo, and I'm going to come down here, move it down, squash it in Y, scale it all up, and this obviously doesn't look anything like our base in our concept, which is just like kind of a bunch of rocks, but we'll figure that out. So let's just start smoothing and pushing stuff around. And first things first, we'll convert this to a Dynamesh. And then we'll lower the resolution so we can more easily push things around for now. And that's constantly a thing that you're going to have to juggle in ZBrush, is just is finding out what resolutions to work at sometimes. I'm going to turn on Sculptris Pro so I can really push things, get kind of crazy, get a little zany with it. And I appreciate you guys spending your time with me. This is great. All learning together, we're ZBrushing together. Oh, it's a good day. It's a good day. And these are crazy times we live in, people. So it's good that we can get together and do something positive. So again, I'm just using the snake hook. I got Sculptris Pro mode on, trying to just reach that the shape of those rocks. And there are some cool tools that we can use to make this look more rigid and fractured and more like a rock, other than these kind of organic-y, type things. And I'll show you in a second here. So I'm pushing and pulling and just trying to get things to match. And then I want the bottom of this thing to be flat, so I'm going to teach you a pro tip. This is a pro tip here. Kick punch pro tip, if you will. So if you come over and if you hold Control Shift, you'll see that the select deal is on. If I click on that guy and come over to Clip Curve, and then I Control left click and drag, I draw these lines out, right? And you can drag those any which way you want, but for me, I just wanted to flatten that guy, so it flattens it right out. And then I just re-dynameshed. You can do all kinds of crazy stuff with this. You can do a curved cut. You can do all kinds of stuff. There's actually an even better one now. Control Shift. This knife curve one actually, it a lot of times gets a way better result just slicing that geo. So there's several options there to play around with. Okay, cool. And then I hit P to go to perspective mode. So P goes from orthographic to perspective mode. Just makes everything look better. I'm going to use the H polish and continue to push this geo around a smidge. And it kind of gives it that interesting kind of rocky feeling, that creased kind of vibe. Okay. Now, I want to maintain these creases, right? And so, as I showed earlier, we can do a few things. We can up the resolution on our mesh now that we've gotten it to a more indicative shape of rock. And then we can turn on polish, and look at that. It just makes it nice and smooth, which is maybe something we do want, maybe something we don't want. I'm using the Damien standard brush to kind of introduce some cracking and things into that. So we're getting more into the nitty-gritty details at this point. I'm getting a little bit sidetracked, I'm not gonna lie, because we got to make a sword for this guy and a cape still. And again, I hate to shamelessly plug, but if you guys could make sure to just give that little like button a little nudge, and maybe a little bit of comments here and there, a little bit of a subscribe a Rooski. That's something my dad would say, subscribe a Rooski. Then it helps me to stay motivated, and I just get so pumped. It's like, it feels like you've given me $100. If you've given me that like, just like, man, it's worth 100 bones to me. So, kind of envisioning where these cracks go, and switching back to the H polish, and just there's an interesting brush too called let's see if I can remember. I think it's called Crumble. So C, and then where is it? Wish I could spell. Spelling's hard. Where is that guy? Oh, right here, Crumble. And I like to scale this up, and then just let's turn off Sculptris Pro, and then you can see it kind of pushes things around, but it also introduces these interesting. Whoa! Sometimes it gets crazy. So I'm going to go to solo mode, which is going to temporarily isolate this subtool. We're going to hide it from everything else. And then it makes everything look like rock. Like a fractal kind of rock, which is cool. Another awesome thing that Zbrush has introduced is in the deformation tab, you can come down here to contrast and just crank all your contrasts out. And once you, I'm going to turn off polish for now and then just up my resolution. And hopefully it'll retain that detailing better, so a lot better. But one thing you do when you're sending stuff off to print is I will run this filter on almost everything just to bump the contrast, because once you get things printed at scale, you don't see those details that you noodled on nearly as well. So I'm switching back to orthographic view, so I have a perfect side view, and I'm going to use that clip curve brush again to flatten out the bottom. Okay, awesome. And then I'm going to save, because sometimes things crash. So turn off solo, and now we've got this fun, freaking cool looking rock base this guy's standing on. And we're still seeing all these polygons. It looks like he's wearing, what's it called? Those pants that have the stripes in them. What are they called? I can't remember. Freak. Anyway, it looks like he's got some weird kind of, I don't know, something weird going on with his pants. Corduroy. It looks like he's got corduroys on. So we're going to hit Control D and subdivide that a few times to smooth that out. And boom, we're rocking, ready to rock. All right, I'm going to hit save, and then let's see how things are looking in relation to our concept. And honestly, I'm not going to be super nitpicky with the concept. I want it to be pretty close. Like his arm would probably be coming out further, but I actually like how dynamic his pose is. I like that his head's bigger too than his body, and I kind of like the proportions of his body a little bit better. I might do this though, however, and scoot up things just a little. Arch his back just a little bit more. Yeah. The other thing you need to do when you subdivide your character, if you want to have that transpose still working, you have to come back up here and just do activate symmetry and then use posable. You have to just re-click that button and it'll work. So now we're back into symmetrical. Kind of bowing his legs out, I think that makes him look a little more athletic and a little scarier. But again, because I've been smoothing this character, we've somewhat thinned him out too much. So I'm going to inflate using symmetry. Yeah. And this is good too overall for the durability of the print, just to have things inflated out a little bit more. His contact points of his feet are definitely going to be a breaking point come when the 3D print happens. So that's something to be aware of too. Okay, awesome. I think I'm going to call it on this particular video because I got to get back to work. But yeah, I'm happy with this character so far. I think he's fun. His pose is looking good. And I'm going to scale this face out just a smidge. And then squash it in Y. Yeah, cool. Okay, so saving. So yeah, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.